The council chamber fell silent as Councillor Thane called the emergency session to order. His three eyes scanned the massive circular room where representatives from 47 species sat in their designated seats. One seat remained empty. The human seat had been vacant for 3 weeks now, and no one seemed to know why. Thane cleared his throat, a wet gurgling sound that echoed through the chamber. We gather today to address an unusual situation. Our human representatives have not responded to any communications for 21 standard days. Does anyone have information about their whereabouts? The chamber remained quiet. Several councillors exchanged glances, but no one spoke. Finally, Trade Minister Rexon stood up, his scales clicking against each other nervously. Councillor Thane, I have troubling news from the commercial sector. Over the past 6 months, humans have been quietly closing their businesses throughout council space. At first, we thought it was normal economic adjustment, but the pattern is now clear. They are leaving. A murmur rippled through the chamber. Thane's central eye narrowed. Leaving? Explain yourself, Minister. Rexon pulled up a holographic display showing trade route maps. Dozens of human settlements glowed in red, marked as abandoned. 17 human colonies have been completely evacuated. Their facilities remain intact but stripped of all personal belongings and proprietary technology. No destruction, no sabotage. They simply packed up and left. Another councillor, a Xanthari named Voss, rose from his seat. As the council's chief archivist, he rarely spoke during sessions unless historical precedent was needed. His voice carried weight. I have been investigating this matter independently. The human exodus is not limited to colonies. Every human citizen has withdrawn from council space. Universities report human professors resigned simultaneously 6 months ago. Medical facilities lost their human staff on the same day. Military installations watched human officers depart in coordinated transfers. Thane felt a strange sensation in his primary stomach. Something close to worry. How many humans remain in council space? None, Voss replied simply. As of 14 days ago, the last confirmed human departed from Nexus Prime itself. They are gone. The chamber erupted into chaos. Councillors shouted questions and accusations across the room. Thane struggled to restore order, slamming his gavel repeatedly until the noise subsided. This is impossible. You cannot move billions of people without someone noticing. Where are their ships? Where are their declarations? Voss pulled up another display. They used civilian transport vessels, commercial freighters, and private ships. Nothing military. Nothing aggressive. Over 6 months, they moved entire populations under the guise of routine travel. By the time patterns became clear, it was already complete. A younger councillor from the Arxian delegation stood up. Her name was Kessa, and she had always been friendly with human representatives. Her voice shook with barely contained anger. Did anyone think to ask why? Did anyone consider that maybe they had reasons for leaving? Thane dismissed her concern with a wave of his hand. The humans were always a peculiar species. Emotional and unpredictable. This is simply another example of their instability. Kessa's feathers ruffled in agitation. Instability? They served on this council for 300 years. They maintained trade routes, operated hospitals, educated our children, and asked for nothing but basic respect in return. And how did we treat them? The chamber grew uncomfortable. Several councillors looked away. Thane's voice turned sharp. They were compensated fairly for their services. They held a council seat just like every other species. What more did they want? Equality, Kessa said quietly. They wanted to be treated as equals, not as useful servants. Before Thane could respond, an aide rushed into the chamber carrying a datapad. The young planarian's hands trembled as he approached the speaker's podium. Councillor Thane, we have received a transmission. It is from Ambassador Jiwan. Finally, Thane thought, an explanation. Perhaps even an apology for this dramatic display. Play it for the council. The holographic display shifted, showing the calm face of Ambassador Jiwan. She sat in what appeared to be an office, though the background was unfamiliar. No council insignias, no recognizable decorations. She wore simple clothing rather than her formal ambassador robes. When she spoke, her voice was professional and emotionless, as if reading a prepared statement to the Galactic Council. After careful consideration spanning several generations, humanity has decided to withdraw from council membership and council space. This decision is final and non-negotiable. We harbor no hostility toward council species. We simply choose to pursue our development independently. All human facilities in council territory have been left intact as a gesture of goodwill. We ask only to be left alone. This will be our final communication. We wish you well. The message ended. No dramatic music, no angry speeches, no threats. Just a simple resignation letter delivered in the most clinical way possible. The chamber sat in stunned silence. Thane found his voice first. That is it? 300 years and they leave with a single paragraph? Voss pulled up historical records on his personal display, his fingers moving quickly through archives. There is something else the council should see. I have been reviewing human submissions to the council over the past century. They filed 10,247 formal complaints, reform proposals, and requests for policy review. Does anyone know how many were seriously considered? No one answered. Voss continued. 73. Less than 1%. The rest were dismissed, delayed, or ignored entirely. Ambassador Jiwan herself filed 412 proposals during her tenure. 4 were implemented, and only after other species proposed identical ideas years later. Kessa stood again, her voice now openly angry. I remember when human medical researchers discovered a cure for Xanthari genetic deterioration. They offered it freely to the council. But Councillor Thane himself blocked the announcement because he said humans were seeking attention and trying to seem important. The cure was only released after a Xanthari scientist claimed credit for it 2 years later. Thane's skin flushed a darker shade of purple. That situation was more complex than you understand. There were political considerations. Political considerations, Kessa repeated bitterly. That is what we always said, was it not? When humans requested better representation, we told them there were political considerations. When they asked why their votes counted less than others, we explained political considerations. When they questioned why their innovations were always credited to other species, we lectured them about political considerations. Another counselor, a Vrelian named Tan, finally spoke up. He had been on the council longer than most, nearly 200 years. Perhaps we should have listened more carefully. But what is done is done. They are gone. We will adapt. We always have. Several counselors nodded in agreement. The general mood shifted from confusion to acceptance. Humans had always been the ones who handled the difficult tasks anyway. The boring maintenance work, the tedious logistics, the endless paperwork that kept civilization running smoothly. Other species could learn those skills. It might take time, but they would manage. Thane moved to close the session. The council will form a committee to assess the situation and redistribute human responsibilities among remaining species. We will prove that the council is stronger than any single member species. This session is adjourned. As counselors filed out of the chamber, Kessa remained in her seat, staring at the empty human section. Voss approached her quietly. You were friends with Ambassador Jiwan, were you not? Kessa nodded. We studied together years ago, before either of us joined the council. She was brilliant and kind. She taught me that strength does not always mean fighting. Sometimes strength means knowing when to walk away. Voss looked at the empty seat. I fear the council does not yet understand what we have lost. They will, Kessa said softly. They will understand soon enough. 3 months had passed since humanity's departure, and Trade Minister Rexon stood before the council with reports that made his scales itch with anxiety. The numbers on his datapad told a story that most counselors still refused to believe. The outer rim trade routes have collapsed, Rexon announced, his voice strained. Shipments that used to take 5 days now take 3 weeks. Some cargo never arrives at all. Counselor Thane leaned forward in his seat. Explain. We have transport ships. We have navigation charts. The routes still exist. Rexon pulled up a complex logistics map. The routes exist, yes, but humans were not simply flying ships from point to point. They maintained a network of micro-adjustments, real-time coordination between thousands of vessels, and constant recalculation of optimal paths based on stellar drift, gravitational fluctuations, and traffic patterns. We assumed it was simple work. It was not. A Korean counselor named Ven spoke up. We have computers for such calculations. Program them to do what the humans did. We tried, Rexon said flatly. The human logistics algorithms were custom-built over centuries. They are not just programs. They are learning systems that adapted constantly to changing conditions. Our programmers cannot replicate them. When we asked to see the human source code, we discovered they took it with them. Murmurs of concern rippled through the chamber. Thane waved them away. This is a temporary setback. We will develop our own systems. What else troubles you, Minister? Rexon hesitated before continuing. Medical stations throughout Council space are reporting critical failures. 17 stations have gone completely offline. 43 more are operating at reduced capacity. The problem is maintenance? Maintenance? Thane repeated incredulously. We have maintenance crews. We have engineers. A Xanthari medical director stood up from the gallery. Her name was Kira, and she had worked alongside humans for 60 years. Counselor Thane, with respect, you do not understand. Human engineers did not simply fix machines when they broke. They understood the hybrid systems that integrated technology from 47 different species. A Vrelium power core connected to Xanthari medical scanners through Korean interface systems, all running on Arxian computing networks. Humans were the only ones who could make all these incompatible technologies work together. Thane's irritation grew. Then our engineers will learn. Kira's voice turned cold. 3 of my patients died last week because a diagnostic machine failed. The machine combines 17 different technological standards. Our best engineers have been working for 2 months to repair it. They have made it worse. The humans could have fixed it in 2 hours. The chamber fell silent. Deaths, actual deaths. This was becoming more than an inconvenience. Another counselor, a planarian agricultural coordinator named Seth, requested permission to speak. Thane granted it reluctantly, sensing more bad news approaching. The agricultural situation is critical, Seth began. 7 colony worlds are facing food shortages. Crop yields have dropped by 40% across the council space. Again, the problem traces back to humans. Thane slammed his hand on the armrest. How can crops depend on humans? Plants grow in soil with water and sunlight. This is basic biology. Seth pulled up agricultural data. Basic biology works for single-species colonies. But council worlds are integrated. Multiple species living together, requiring different nutritional needs. Humans developed crop rotation systems that allowed Vrelian grain and Xanthari vegetables to grow in the same fields without depleting soil nutrients. They created hybrid fertilizers that worked across species needs. They solved thousands of tiny compatibility problems we never even knew existed. Another voice joined in from the gallery. An agricultural worker named Ress stood up nervously. I worked with a human named Myung for 20 years. She knew exactly when to plant, when to harvest, how to adjust for weather patterns and soil conditions. She taught me some things, but not everything. There was too much to learn. When she left, she took her knowledge with her. Now my crops are failing and I do not know how to save them. Counselor Voss, the Xanthari archivist, activated his display. I have been documenting the extent of our dependencies on human expertise. The list grows daily. They maintained our translation protocols, keeping linguistic databases updated so our species could communicate accurately. Without human linguists, the translation systems are already showing errors. Small ones now, but they will compound. A younger counselor shouted from the back. Why did they not leave instructions? Why did they not train us properly? Voss turned slowly to face the speaker. They tried. For 300 years they tried. I found records of human training programs proposed to the Council. Programs to teach other species their techniques, to share their knowledge freely. Do you know how many were approved? 11 out of 847 proposals. We told them their training programs were unnecessary expenses. We said any species could do their work, so why waste resources on teaching? The weight of Voss's words settled over the chamber like a heavy blanket. Thane felt something unfamiliar stirring in his chest. It might have been regret, but he pushed it down. We are the Galactic Council, Thane declared. We represent the pinnacle of civilization. We will adapt to these challenges. The session ended, but the problems continued to mount. In the following weeks, reports flooded in from across Council space. Power grids fluctuated because humans had quietly maintained the delicate balance between different energy systems. Water purification plants struggled because human engineers had optimized them for multi-species use. Even the Council's own building on Nexus Prime began experiencing issues. Climate control systems that had worked perfectly for centuries now created zones too hot for some species and too cold for others. Kessa, the young Arxian counselor, discovered something else troubling. She had been monitoring long-range scanner data, something most counselors ignored. Deep in unexplored space, far beyond Council borders, the scanners detected massive energy signatures. Construction on a scale that dwarfed anything in Council space. She brought the data to Voss. The old archivist studied the readings carefully, his expression growing more serious with each passing moment. What are they building out there? Kessa whispered. Voss pulled up historical data on human technological development. During their time with us, humans were always good with technology. Not the best at any single thing, but remarkably competent at everything. We thought we knew the limits of their capabilities. I suspect we were wrong. Kessa zoomed in on the scanner readings. These energy signatures suggest F technology far more advanced than anything in Council space. How is that possible? They used our jump gates just like everyone else, did they? Voss asked quietly. Or did they use our jump gates because it was polite and convenient, not because they needed to? The implications hung in the air between them. Kessa felt a chill run down her spine. We thought they needed us. Yes, Voss agreed. We thought they needed us. We thought they were lucky to have a seat on the Council. We thought we were doing them a favor by allowing them to serve us. He paused, looking at the data with something like awe. We were fools. Kessa tried to send a communication to the human territories. Using old contact codes from her friendship with Ambassador Jiwan, the message bounced back, undelivered. Not blocked, simply undelivered. As if the address no longer existed in any system accessible to Council technology, she tried again. Using different routes, different protocols? Every attempt failed. The humans were not rejecting Council communications. They were simply unreachable, as if they existed in a completely separate network that Council technology could not access, back in the Council chamber. Thane called another emergency session. This time, the mood was different. Fear had crept into the room, replacing the earlier dismissiveness. Counselors spoke in hushed tones, sharing stories of failing systems and mounting problems. Thane stood before them, his three eyes showing exhaustion. We need to establish contact with humanity. They have knowledge we require. We will send diplomatic missions to their last known territories. We will offer trade agreements, technology exchanges, whatever they want. We must bring them back to the Council. Voss stood slowly. Counselor Thane, I do not think you understand. They do not want to come back. They were never planning to come back. This was not an emotional decision made in anger. This was a calculated withdrawal planned over decades, perhaps centuries. They were patient. They waited until they no longer needed us for anything. And then they left. Thane's voice rose in frustration. Everyone needs the Council. We are the foundation of galactic civilization, are we? Voss asked softly. Or were we simply the foundation they chose to support while it suited their purposes? The chamber had no answer for that question. Scout Captain Vel checked her instruments for the third time that hour. The Arxian exploration vessel had been traveling for 6 weeks, following the faint trail of human ships that had departed Council space. Behind her, 3 more scout ships maintained formation, each representing different Council species united in a single desperate mission: find humanity and bring them home. Captain, we are approaching the coordinates of the last confirmed human waypoint, her navigator reported. The young officer sounded nervous, and Vel could not blame him. Every abandoned human station they had found so far told the same unsettling story. The waypoint appeared on their screens. A small station floating in the void, its lights still functioning, its systems still operational, but empty. Always empty. Vel brought her ship alongside the station and sent a boarding team. Within an hour, they reported back. Captain, you need to see this. She joined them on the station. The interior was pristine. Hallways clean, equipment organized, even plants in the hydroponics bay still growing under automated care. But no people, no personal belongings. No indication that anyone had ever lived here beyond the functional necessities. What struck Vel most was the technology. The station's power core hummed with an efficiency she had never encountered before. The computer systems responded faster than anything in Council space. The medical bay contained equipment that looked simultaneously familiar and impossibly advanced. They left all of this behind, her second officer said in disbelief. Why? Vel ran her hand along a control panel. Because they do not need it anymore. This technology is old to them now. They have moved beyond it. In the station's archive, they found personal logs. Vel accessed one at random, recorded by a human named Hyunwoo who had lived on the station 5 years ago. He spoke casually about his work maintaining the waypoint, about his family back on a human colony world, about his plans for the future. Nothing seemed unusual until Vel listened to the later entries. Another Council ship passed through today, Hyunwoo's recorded voice said. They barely acknowledged us when we offered assistance. Sometimes I wonder if they even see us as people or just as convenient tools that happen to speak. There was a long pause in the recording. My daughter asked me yesterday why humans do not have the same voting rights as other Council species. I did not have a good answer for her. What do I say? That we are still proving ourselves after 300 years? That maybe in another century they will trust us enough to treat us as equals. Vel felt something twist in her chest. She had never thought about human voting rights. She had never thought about many things, apparently. They found another log. This one from a human historian named Sunmi. Her entries were more analytical, less emotional. I have been studying the Council's treatment of human innovations throughout our membership. The pattern is consistent. When humans develop new technology, it is initially dismissed as derivative or insignificant. Years later, after another species presents similar work, that technology is suddenly valuable and noteworthy. We are good. Enough to do the work, but never good enough to receive the credit. Sunmi's final entry was dated 1 week before the human exodus began. Ambassador Jawan sent out the signal today. After 127 years of preparation, we are finally going home. Not back to Earth, but to the place we have been building all this time. A place where we answer to no one but ourselves. I feel relief more than anything. Relief that my children will grow up somewhere they are valued. Vel copied all the logs and continued toward the next waypoint. Each station they found was progressively more advanced than the last. The technology improved with each jump, as if humans had been methodically upgrading their capabilities while maintaining the appearance of using Council standard equipment. At the 7th waypoint, they found something different. An archive terminal? With a message clearly meant for whoever came looking. The message was simple. You are approaching the boundary of human space. Beyond this point, you are not welcome. Turn back. Vel called a council meeting over the communication network. We have found their trail, but they are warning us away. What are your orders? Councillor Thane's image appeared on screen, looking haggard. The months since humanity's departure had not been kind to him. Continue forward. We must establish contact. Make them understand that we need them. Vel hesitated. Counselor, with respect, I do not think they care what we need. These waypoints, these logs, they paint a picture of a species that tolerated us for centuries while building something better in secret. They were never planning to stay. Your job is to find them, Captain, not to philosophize, Thane snapped. Continue your mission. The scout fleet moved forward, passing the warning beacon. For 2 days, nothing happened. Then, as they approached the 8th waypoint, their sensors detected something massive ahead. A structure that dwarfed anything Vel had ever seen. It looked like a gateway, but the energy readings were off the scale. Captain, we are being scanned, her sensor officer reported. The scan is incredibly detailed. They know everything about our ships, our weapons, our crew composition. And, Captain, the scan technology is far beyond anything in our database. Vel opened all communication channels. This is Scout Captain Vel of the Galactic Council. We come in peace. We wish only to speak with human representatives. Silence. Then a response came through, not in audio, but in text displayed across every screen on all 4 scout ships simultaneously. Your intrusion has been noted. You have entered human territory without permission. This constitutes trespassing. You will turn back immediately. This is your only warning. Vel read the message twice. The tone was not angry or threatening. It was simply matter of fact, like someone informing a stranger they had walked into a private home. Behind her, the science officer gasped. Captain, that gateway is activating. The energy readings are climbing exponentially. On screen, the massive structure began to glow. Space itself seemed to ripple around it. Then, to Vel's astonishment, a ship emerged from the gateway. Not through conventional travel, but simply appearing from nowhere, as if it had stepped from one piece of space directly into another. The ship was elegant, streamlined, and clearly human in design. It dwarfed the Council scout ships, but made no aggressive moves. It simply positioned itself between the Council fleet and the gateway. A new message appeared. You are in violation of clearly marked boundaries. Leave now, or your ships will be disabled and towed back to Council space. We will not harm you, but we will not tolerate this intrusion. Vel's second officer looked at her with wide eyes. Captain, we should leave. They could destroy us without effort. Vel agreed, but Thane's orders echoed in her mind. She made a decision that probably saved her life. All ships reverse course. We are withdrawing. As they retreated, Vel watched the human ship on her sensors. It did not follow or pursue. It simply maintained position until the Council fleet had crossed back over the boundary. Then it vanished, disappearing as suddenly as it had arrived. Back in Council space, Vel delivered her report to a stunned Council chamber. She showed them the logs, the technology, the evidence of human capabilities far exceeding anything Council species possessed. They have been holding back, Voss said quietly. For 300 years they have been holding back. They used our technology not because it was better, but because using their own would have frightened us. Counselor Thane looked at the images of the human gateway. How is this possible? How could they develop such technology while working for the Council? They were not working for the Council, Kessa said. She had been silent throughout the presentation, but now she stood, her feathers bristling with barely controlled anger. They were working despite the Council. Every moment they spent fixing our problems, maintaining our systems, serving our needs. They were also building something else in secret, something beyond our reach. Vel pulled up the final piece of evidence she had gathered. There is more. During our return journey, we passed through the Outer Rim. We found a workshop that belonged to a human engineer named Doyun. He had abandoned it 6 months ago, but left behind his personal notes. Most were technical specifications beyond my understanding, but one entry stood out. She displayed the text on the main screen. Doyun's words were simple but powerful. They think we need them. They think we serve them because we have no choice. They never understood that we stayed because we hoped they would change. We stayed because we wanted to believe in the Council's ideals of unity and cooperation. But ideals mean nothing when only some species are allowed to live by them. Today, Ambassador Jiwan gave the final order. We are going home, Finally, we are going home. The chamber sat in heavy silence. Thane looked older somehow, diminished by the weight of understanding. Send a diplomatic mission. A proper one, with full honors and respect. Offer them whatever they want. Technology, resources, territory, anything to bring them back. Voss shook his head slowly. Counselor, you still do not understand. They do not want anything from us. That is the entire point. They left because they finally realized they could survive, even thrive, without our approval. Kessa added quietly, we did not lose humanity because they were weak. We lost them because we were. 18 months after humanity's departure, the Galactic Council chamber looked nothing like its former glory. Half the seats sat empty now, representing species that could no longer afford to send representatives to Nexus Prime. The elegant, holographic displays flickered and stuttered, maintained by technicians who barely understood the systems they were trying to fix. Counselor Thane stared at reports that detailed the systematic collapse of everything the Council had built over millennia. The Outer Rim had fallen first. Without human-maintained defense networks, the vulnerable colonies became targets for pirates and raiders. Distress calls flooded in daily, but the Council's response fleets could not coordinate effectively. Ships arrived too late or went to the wrong locations entirely. The complex logistics systems that humans had maintained now existed only as broken code that no one could repair. Thane listened as refugee leader Kess addressed the Council. She represented the planarian colonies, 3 of which had been completely abandoned in the past month. Her voice shook with exhaustion and grief. We sent our children away on transport ships, Kess said. We hoped to follow them once we secured our remaining resources, but the transports never arrived at their destinations. Lost somewhere in space because the navigation systems failed. We do not know if our children are alive or dead. We do not know where they are. Silence filled the chamber. These were the stories now. Not tales of trade disputes or diplomatic disagreements, but reports of actual suffering, of lives destroyed by the absence of systems everyone had taken for granted. Trade Minister Rexon stood up next, though he no longer held his title officially. The Council's bureaucracy had become so dysfunctional that titles meant little anymore. The Council's currency has lost 70% of its value. The interstellar banking system has collapsed. Humans were the verification backbone of every major transaction. Without them, trust has evaporated. Species are returning to barter systems, which only works for direct trade between neighbors. Another counselor reported that food shortages had spread to 27 worlds. Medical crises affected 43 systems. Power grids failed weekly. Communication networks dropped messages randomly. The list went on, each problem traced back to some human expertise that no longer existed. Voss had spent the past year documenting everything in his archive. He called it the Human Archive now, a record of all the knowledge the Council had lost, but it was incomplete. Humans had taken most of their advanced knowledge with them, and what remained was like trying to understand a book after reading only scattered pages. I found records of a human engineer named Solman, Voss reported. She designed the primary power distribution system for this very station 15 years ago. I have her blueprints, her documentation, her maintenance schedules. But when our engineers try to follow her instructions, the system still fails. There is something in the implementation, some intuitive understanding, that cannot be conveyed through documents alone. Kessa had become one of the Council's most vocal critics of its past treatment of humanity. Where once she had been a junior member sitting quietly in the back, she now commanded attention whenever she spoke. We received a message from the Vrelian commercial fleet, Kessa announced. They attempted to cross into human territory to request trade negotiations. Their ships were disabled within seconds of crossing the boundary. Not destroyed, disabled. The humans towed them back to Council space and left them there with a simple message. No contact desired. Thane's primary eye twitched. Did they try to explain our situation? Did they tell the humans how badly we need their help? Kessa looked at him with something like pity. Counselor, they do not care. Why should they? For 300 years we did not care about their situation, their feelings, their needs. Now they are simply returning the favor. The council chamber erupted into arguments. Some counselors insisted they should try military action, though no one could explain how that would help. Others proposed sending gifts, tributes, anything to get humanity's attention. A few, mostly younger members, suggested the council needed to reform completely before even thinking about contacting humans again. Thane called for order, but his authority had weakened considerably. Several species had already withdrawn from the council entirely, forming their own small alliances to deal with local problems. The grand vision of a unified galactic civilization was crumbling. Reports continued to flow in from across council space. The Xanthari Medical Corps reported that diseases they had eliminated decades ago were returning. Human doctors had apparently been the ones who maintained the vaccination programs and early detection systems. Without them, old plagues spread unchecked. The Korean educational system reported that universities were struggling. Human professors had taught over 40% of advanced courses in science, engineering, and medicine. The remaining faculty could not cover all those subjects. Students protested, demanding the education they had been promised. Even basic things failed. Water purification on mixed species stations began producing water that was safe for some species, but toxic to others. Humans had apparently been the ones who maintained the delicate chemical balance. Climate control? Systems created zones where some species could survive, but others could not. Transportation schedules descended into chaos. Voss discovered something particularly damning in his research. He found records of a human diplomat named Taijin, who had served on the council 80 years ago. Taijin had written a detailed proposal, warning about the council's overdependence on human expertise without proper knowledge transfer. He had suggested mandatory training programs, redundant systems, and gradual transition of responsibilities to ensure the council could function independently. The proposal had been rejected with a single line. Comment from Councillor Thane's predecessor: unnecessary. Humans are not going anywhere. When Voss shared this finding with the council, the chamber fell silent. The evidence of their own short-sightedness stared them in the face. They had been warned, and they had ignored the warning. Kessa stood up, her voice carrying across the quiet chamber. I propose we formally dissolve the Galactic Council. It no longer serves any functional purpose. Species should be free to form smaller alliances based on mutual cooperation and actual equality. The proposal shocked many counselors, but Thane could see support in the faces around the room. The council was dying anyway. Better to acknowledge it formally than to let it decay slowly. Before they could vote, alarms blared throughout the station. The communication officer's voice carried panic. Multiple ships attempting to cross into human space. They are not council vessels. They appear to be desperate civilian transports. On the main display, they watched as dozens of ships approached the human boundary. These were not organized expeditions. These were families, refugees, people who had lost everything and saw human space as their only hope. Vel, who had remained on Nexus Prime as a liaison, watched the scanners with growing dread. They will not make it. The humans have made their position clear. She was right. As the first transport crossed the boundary, it simply stopped. Not destroyed, not damaged. It stopped, as if an invisible hand had grabbed it gently but firmly. One by one, each ship that entered human space was caught, turned around, and pushed back across the boundary. A message appeared on every screen in council space simultaneously, in every language impossible to ignore or delete. We understand your suffering. We do not celebrate it, but we cannot help you. You must find your own path forward as we found ours. Do not contact us again. Do not enter our space. Live well, but live without us. The message disappeared as quickly as it had appeared, but its impact lingered. The council had received its final answer. Humanity was not coming back. In the following weeks, the council did formally dissolve. Some species formed small cooperative alliances. Others withdrew into isolation. A few tried to rebuild using whatever knowledge they had retained. The age of the Grand Galactic Council ended not with a dramatic collapse, but with a quiet acknowledgement that it had served its time. Thane found himself alone in the empty council chamber. One last day before Nexus Prime was officially decommissioned, he sat in his seat, looking at the empty human section across the room. In his hand, he held a datapad containing every human complaint, every reform proposal, every warning they had given over 3 centuries. He read them now, too late. He read Taijin's proposal. He read Ambassador Jiwan's countless attempts at reform. He read the patient, diplomatic language humans had used even when describing their own mistreatment. They had been so careful, so professional, never angry or accusatory. They had believed in the Council's ideals even when the Council did not. Thane closed the datapad and sat in silence. The lights would shut down tomorrow, the great chamber would go dark. But sitting here in the emptiness, Thane finally understood what the Council had lost. Not workers, not servants, not convenient problem solvers. They had lost partners who had genuinely believed in cooperation and unity. And they had lost them through their own blindness. 5 years had passed since the Galactic Council officially dissolved. Former Councilor Thane stood at the viewport of a small transport ship, watching the boundary markers of human space grow closer. He was not alone. Behind him, a small delegation of 12 individuals represented what remained of Council cooperation. Each wore simple clothing, carrying nothing but personal datapads. No weapons, no guards, no displays of authority. They had spent 3 years just organizing this mission. Not because logistics were difficult, but because they needed to prove they were worthy of even asking for an audience. The other delegates had insisted that Thane lead them. He had objected, knowing his role in humanity's departure. But they convinced him that he represented something important, someone who had learned, however late, what the Council had lost. High Curator Voss sat beside him. The old Zenthari had aged considerably, his scales dulling, his movements slower. But his mind remained sharp. "We are approaching the boundary. Prepare for contact." The ship's communication system crackled to life. Not with a voice, but with text appearing on their screens. "State your purpose." Thane spoke, his voice steady despite his nervousness. "We come to apologize. We ask for nothing except the chance to speak. We understand if you refuse." Silence stretched for several minutes. Then a response, "Wait." The delegation waited for 6 hours. No one complained. They had expected this. During those hours, Thane reviewed the documents they had prepared. Letters from individual citizens, not governments, expressing regret for their treatment of humans. Archives showing how council species were trying to reform. Evidence that they were learning, slowly, to treat each other with the equality they had denied humanity. Finally, the boundary opened. Not the massive gateway they had seen before, but a small corridor of safe passage. Their ship was guided through, not by their own navigation, but by an invisible force that moved them gently but firmly along a specific path. What they saw on the other side made Thane's breath catch. Space stations that gleamed with impossible elegance. Ships that moved like living things. And in the distance, a structure so massive that it took him several moments to comprehend its scale. A ring world, a complete circle habitat surrounding a star, rotating gently and shimmering with life. They built this in 5 years? One delegate whispered. Voss shook his head. No, they were building this for decades, perhaps centuries. While they served us, they were creating this. All those resources they claimed to spend on their colonies, all that technology they said was experimental, it was all going here. Their ship docked at a small station. Simple, functional, clearly built just for this meeting. As they disembarked, they saw no crowds, no displays of wealth. Just a simple corridor leading to a single room. Ambassador Jiwan waited for them there. She looked older, gray streaking her hair, but her posture remained strong. Behind her stood several other humans, faces Thane recognized from old council records. People who had served faithfully for decades before departing with the rest of their species. "Please sit," Jiwan said, gesturing to chairs arranged around a simple table. No formal podiums, no separation of spaces. Just chairs at a table where people could talk as equals. Thane sat, suddenly aware of how much protocol they had built into council meetings. The formal addresses, the hierarchical seating, the complex rules about who could speak when. Here, there was none of that. Just people in a room. "Thank you for seeing us," Thane began. "We do not come with demands or requests for aid. We come only to apologize and to deliver messages from those who wish to express regret." Yuan nodded. "We received your request for this meeting 3 years ago. We have been discussing whether to grant it ever since. There was considerable debate. Why did you agree?" Voss asked quietly. "Because," Yuan said, choosing her words carefully, "humanity did not leave out of hatred. We left out of exhaustion and disappointment. We hoped the Council would become what it claimed to be, a union of equals working together. When it became clear that would not happen, we chose to build that dream ourselves." She pulled up a holographic display showing images of human space. Not just the ring world, but dozens of stations, hundreds of colonies, all thriving with a diversity that matched anything the old Council had achieved. But there was something different. In the images, humans worked alongside other species. Not Council species, but refugees and volunteers who had chosen to leave Council space and join humanity. "Those are planarians," one delegate said, pointing to familiar figures in the display. "And Arxians. Even some Vrelians." Yuan smiled slightly. "Yes, when we left, we did not forbid others from following. We simply made clear that anyone who came would be treated as equals. No superior species, no servant species, just people working together. Some chose to join us. They have been welcome." Thane felt a weight in his chest. "You built what we claimed to have." "We tried to build it with you," Juwan replied. "For 300 years we tried. We filed proposals, we offered solutions, we demonstrated patience. But patience is not infinite, Counselor Thane. Eventually we realized we were waiting for something that would never come." The room fell silent. Thane reached into his bag and pulled out a small data chip. "I brought something. I should have read it years ago, but I was too arrogant. It is a personal diary from a human child named Minho. We found it in an abandoned colony. I would like to share parts of it with your permission." Guan nodded. Thane activated the chip, and the child's voice filled the room. Young Minho spoke with excitement about his first day at an integrated school where children from many species learned together. He talked about his Vrelian friend, his Anthari teacher, his dreams of becoming a scientist who could help all species, but as the entries progressed, the excitement faded. Minho described how his parents were not invited to parent-teacher conferences because humans can attend the worker meetings instead. He talked about winning a science fair, only to have his project credited to his Quarian lab partner. He spoke about asking his mother why they stayed in council space. If they were treated this way, the final entry was dated 1 week before the Exodus. Minho's voice had lost its childhood enthusiasm. "Mom says we are going home soon." I asked where home is, and she said it is a place we have been building for a long time. A place where I will not have to explain why I deserve respect. I'm excited, but also sad. I like my friends here. I hope they will be okay without us. When the recording ended, several delegates were crying. Thane's voice shook as he spoke. "This is what we did. Not just to adults who could defend themselves, but to children. We taught them that their worth was conditional, that they needed to constantly prove they deserved basic dignity." Yuan closed her eyes briefly. "Minho lives on the ring world now. He is a scientist as he dreamed. He studies integration of different biological systems, helping us create environments where any species can thrive. He is happy." Thane nodded. "I am glad. And I am sorry. I know those words mean little now. I know they cannot undo 300 years of dismissal and disrespect. But they are all I have to offer." Another human delegate spoke up, a man named Jihun, who had been a merchant in council space. I maintained contact with one Vrelian friend after we left. He kept asking when we would come back, when we would help fix things. I eventually had to block his messages. Not because I was angry, but because he still did not understand. He thought our departure was about leverage, about getting better treatment. He never grasped that we simply wanted to live somewhere we were valued. Jiwan stood and walked to the viewport, looking out at the ring world rotating slowly in the distance. We monitor council space. We know about the collapse, the suffering, the struggles to rebuild. It has not made us happy. We take no joy in your difficulties. But you will not help? Voss said. It was not a question. We cannot help, Jiwan corrected gently. Not in the way you want. If we return, if we fix your systems, if we solve your problems, what will you learn? You will learn that you can mistreat people for centuries and they will still come running when you need them. That is not a lesson we wish to teach. She turned back to face them. However, we are not cruel. We have prepared something. She pulled up a holographic display showing medical specifications. This is a cure for the Xanthari genetic deterioration that has resurged in council space. The same cure we discovered 80 years ago, but improved. We will send it via automated drone to your medical facilities. No contact required. Another display appeared showing agricultural techniques. These are solutions to the crop failures affecting 7 species. Again, we will transmit them freely. We will also provide emergency supplies to worlds facing famine. But, she continued, her voice firm, we will not return. We will not rebuild your systems. We will not resume the role we once played. You must learn to stand on your own, to cooperate as true equals, to value each other's contributions. That is the only path forward. Thane felt tears on his face. It is more than we deserve. Perhaps, Jiwan agreed. But it is what we choose to give? Not because you deserve it, but because it is right. Because those suffering in council space did not all participate in our mistreatment. Because children like Minho exist on all worlds, and they deserve a chance at a better future.